We are ready to take a look at cells in Chapter 3. The cellular level of organization. The cell is the structural and functional unit of an organism. The smallest structure that's capable of performing everything for life. So when we talk about the cell is the smallest structure that carries out all the life processes. There are two different groups of cells, and you'll remember this from the chapter where we talked about the three domains. And we either have prokaryotic cells or we have eukaryotic cells. Today we're going to focus on prokaryotes. Prokaryotic cells do not have membrane-bound organelles. Eukaryotic cells possess membrane-enclosed structures, which we know are organelles. The cell theory, you have to know for the test, all organisms are made up of one or more cells. Cells are the basic unit of structure and function in organisms, and all cells come from other cells. Look at the size of living things. These are things you can see with the human eye. These are light microscope, which we're going to learn how to use in this chapter. And this is the electron microscope, which you may be able to see pictures of or actually use it when you get to college, depending on the size of your college. Let's look at the surface area to volume ratio. The amount of surface area affects the ability to get materials into and out of the cell. So as cells increase in volume, the proportionate amount of surface area decreases. For example, if I want to get something into the center of this 4-centimeter cube right here in the middle, I have quite a distance to go to get into it. So this would be like the nucleus of the cell. However, if I were to increase the surface area, you can see that the volume decreases and we can get substances into the center much quicker through lots of different areas. That's what limits our cell sizes. They all three have the same volume, but the group on the right has 4 times the surface area. This is a picture of the cell membrane, and this should look vaguely familiar from the last chapter because we have a phospholipid bilayer. Here's our hydrophilic heads and hydrophobic tails. So this is a cell membrane layer, and the protein molecules that go into it. So all cells are surrounded by what we call a plasma membrane or a cell membrane. The inside of the cell is called the cytoplasm, and it regulates what comes into and out of the cell. So it's like a gateway, and it's called semi-permeable. So only certain things can go into and out of that cell membrane. Let's take a look at prokaryotic cells a little closer. So we said before they don't have membrane-bound organelles, so they do not have a membrane-bound nucleus. Eukaryotic cells do have that. They belong to the domain bacteria and archaea. They're usually unicellular. Sometimes those can be found in strings or clusters as well. And you have to remember that not all of the bacteria cause disease. Some are very beneficial, especially those that are in your lining of your gut. So here's a picture of a typical bacteria, and you notice that it has a flagellum that allows it to move. The fimbriae are hair-like bristles that allow it to stick to other surfaces, adhere to other surfaces. We have ribosomes inside of it, which are the site of protein synthesis. This nucleoid is the chromosome strips within the bacteria. However, there's no membrane around the outside of it. So they have DNA, but they don't have it bound in a nuclear membrane, like a eukaryotic cell. It has a plasma membrane, which is around the cytoplasm. It's that bilipid layer of plasma membrane. They have a cell wall, which supports and structures it, and they also are usually have a capsule around the outside, and this is a gel-like coating outside of the cell wall. The cell wall is made up of what we call peptidoglycan. The capsule is like a slime layer, and the flagella is for movement while the fimbriae are for attachment. There's no membrane around the nucleoid, and it's a single chromosome. And the ribosomes there are, again, for protein synthesis. This is a picture of an actual bacteria, and you can see ribosomes, the nucleoid, the plasma membrane, the cell wall around that, and the capsule around the outside. They're very simple in structure, and they do a lot of different things metabolically. And they can be adapted to most every type of environment, which we talked about when we talked about the archaea bacteria that are found in extreme places like the thermal vents and the polar ice caps. This is just a side-by-side picture of the two that we've already looked at, showing you the similar structures. And on this last slide, this shows us bacteria, the archaea, the bacteria, and the eukaryotes. So if we look at what they have, a cell wall, we usually have a cell wall and there's no peptidoglycan in the archaea. Regular bacteria usually have peptidoglycan and have a cell wall. Eukaryotes sometimes have a cell wall, like plant cells. Animal cells do not, but we do not have peptidoglycan in those eukaryotic cells. Notice that all three main types have cell membranes. The eukaryotes are the only ones with a nucleus. The archaea and the bacteria have no nuclei. They have that swiggle of DNA, that nucleoid, but nothing to surround it to hold it together to call it a nucleus. They do not have membrane-bound organelles in archaea and bacteria, but eukaryotics do. They all three have ribosomes, but the ones in the eukaryotic cells are larger than the prokaryotic cells.